Hey everybody, Jake and Gino here, and we're doing a video today on bank lending terms. This is going to be a great comparison, so when you're dealing with a banker or a broker on your next deal and you're really getting into the meat of it, you know how to speak the language. G-Daddy, how's it going today?
J-Love, I'm doing good. This is exciting for me because this is when the rubber hits the road. Now it's time to look for financing. And now this is sort of the second step because you're looking for the deal. Now you're looking for the money, right, Jake? Especially if it's your first deal. If you've already done a few deals before, you've already got those relationships and you want to really flesh out the relationship. You want to compare apples to apples. Go to 3, 4 different banks, try to get terms from each bank and try to compare each one. And what I like to tell everybody, especially our Jake and Gino community, money is a commodity, guys. It's like anything else. You want to shop around and see who will give you the best deal.
Here's the unfortunate thing for you newbie investors out there. You just busted your butt trying to find a deal. You finally got the deal worked out. Guess what? Getting a bank to finance that deal can sometimes be just as hard as getting the deal when you're fighting for the terms that you want. You can get plain Jane generic terms, 5-year term, 20-year amortization, guaranteeing everything from your firstborn to your home and everything else in between. But to get good banking terms, to really finance right, is not easy. So we're going to cover those today. And I think it all starts with term. Everyone always talks about the rate and everything, but look, we're in a low interest rate environment right now. So the term of the loan is crucial because you want to get that extended out as far as you can to prevent interest rate risk because 99% chance rates are going to go up and they're not going to go down. So you're going to be operating in an environment with cheap money. 10 years from now, 5 years from now, that could change, and that would change the whole picture of your investment.
Now, Jake is referring to term as the maturity of the loan. If you have 4 units or less, it's considered a residential. Everyone, once they see 5 or more, their head starts spinning. They start seeing stars, and it's not that big of a deal. There's not many things that are different. We're going to cover the differences between the commercial financing, which we're talking about 5 or more, and residential. Commercial has terms. They're either 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. I mean, some of them go up to 35.
Agency debt, yeah, you can get to 35. So,
yeah, our first deal, we were thrilled, like most of you out there who are newbies. We took a 5-year term, but we knew that we were buying the property really at a great number, and we knew we were going to be able to finance that out and extend that term another 5 years. Basically, if you have a 5-year term, after year 5, boom, after the 60-month payment, you either have to come up with the money or you have to be able to refinance it. So I hope you have a big chunk of change, or you can be able to refinance the property, or you have to sell. And now, guys, this is exciting right now. Talking to a broker last night, Jake, I got to tell you this. Go out and find brokers who are hungry for your business. Let them look for guys who have CMBS debt right now. Everything is resetting right now. So there's a lot of properties. I got a deal, Jake, 300-unit deal. These guys got to sell. May of 2017, their term is coming up. It's 10 years. So this is the time, the next few months, where you may be able to find some deals out there that these terms are resetting. Hopefully, if you have a great relationship with your bank like we do, we just went through a deal. We had a 5-year term. We're refining the property. He's extending it another 5 years, so to make it 10 years.
10 years.
So
Yep.
Make sure that term is discussed, and hopefully you can negotiate at least a 7-year term on your first deal. Give yourself a little breathing room with the appreciation that you have and the amortization pay down that you have from the tenants. You're going to have some equity by year 7, so you have that ability to refinance it before then. I wanted to spend a little more time on term because I think term is really crucial for you to understand that decision in the financing process.
So here's the next piece. We want to be comparing all of these different pieces of the deal to each bank. So we have bank A, B, and C. We want to be really doing some comparison shopping here. So we're gonna match up bank A against bank B for term, rate,
Yep.
interest. So the next one here is gonna be the rate. Everyone always talks about the rate. Oh, I got this interest rate. It's a big important piece of the puzzle, but it's not everything. And once you have a handful of banks involved, you're going to start seeing what the going rate is in your area.
Now, rate is a couple ways. I know they use the LIBOR. I know a lot of them, agency debt prices it up to some 220 basis points above the 10-year treasury. That's what we're looking at right now. Community banks have a little more flexibility. They price it out a little differently. Right now, as we speak, agency debt is about 4.7%, Jake, and community banks, where we're getting 4.4, 4.5.
That's on a 10-year, though. You might still be able to squeak out a 4.25 on a 5.
On a five. So see, that's what I'm saying. You see what happens with the term, lower term. And when the term is lower for the bank, they're taking on less risk. So less risk for them is a lesser return. So that's how it works with interest rates also. So that's why you want to compare all these things. So rate is very, very important. Another important piece of the puzzle. And Jake and I, in our first deal, we got a 5-year term and a 5.25% interest rate when it should have been a 10-year.
We were getting beat up, right?
And a 4.25. But we got beat up, but we learned a lesson, and it was a wonderful lesson. And that's why we're here talking about it. Because if we can alleviate the pain, if we can get you to a 25-year amort, that would be so awesome for your cash flow. And if we can save you a half a point on your rate, that'll save you a ton of money. Next piece is that interest-only piece. Now, what's funny about interest-only, and a lot of people getting trouble with this. I was talking to a student last night. He's like, yeah, but I can get this loan 3 years interest only. It'll work then. I don't want you guys buying a deal if it only works if you're paying interest only on the deal. That's not buying right. That's buying foolishly because you're taking a risk. Unless you know a year down the road that this thing can really crank up and you've got a lot of income left on the table and you can really cut those expenses. But Jake and I don't like to factor that in. That's gravy for us. If we can get a year of interest only, we know what we're going to do with that money. We're either A, going to distribute it to ourselves, or B, we're going to put it back into the property to raise those rents up. So interest only, some banks want to give 1 year, some banks give 2 years. Agency and Freddie, SBLs, they give up to 3 years of interest only. So that does wonders for your cash flow.
Think about what you just said and how it applies to the term too, because if your profit is skinny on a 5-year term in a low interest rate environment,
Yep.
what's it going to be? If you're not able to reposition it, what's it going to be in 5 years from now when you have to refi? Maybe you're a point or two higher. So that's why it's really important to buy right on these things.
Yep. Next one, Jake, is the amortization. So we talked about the amortization. We got a 20-year amortization on our first deal. We bumped it up to 25 years on our second, and all the rest of our deals. The higher the amortization, the better you're going to cash flow, the lower the payment. Agency debt is a 30-year amort. So you can see the difference between a 20-year amort and a 30-year amort is a really substantial amount of money in paying. And a lot of guys ask me, do you want to get a 15-year amort and pay off the loan quicker, or do you want to go out to 30 years and get more cash flow? Now, that is specific to what your goals are. If you're 22 years old and you're asking me that question and you have the vision to say, hey, by the time I'm 40, I'll have this property paid off, that's great. If you have the diligence and the wherewithal to think that way, that's a great strategy. But Jake and I, we want to cash flow on these properties. We want to get the money today and be able to repurpose that money or to use it for our lifestyles.
Yeah. So next up is the debt service coverage ratio. This is something that banks are going to use. You guys can use our deal analyzer. It's going to calculate that for you. Most banks are looking for 1.2, 1.25 debt service coverage ratio. And like I said, you can check out our deal analyzer. We can link a video in the show notes on that for the deal analyzer, and it'll actually calculate that right out for you.
Next one is a prepayment penalty. Now, the prepayment penalty, basically, you want to find out, if it's a 5-year term, if there's a prepayment penalty at year 1, year 2, year 3, find out when there's the prepayment penalties stop. If there are prepayment penalties, which means if you want to pay the loan before it's due, they're going to hit you for a prepayment penalty. So some of them start with a 3% year 1 because they don't want to do all this work and have you pay the loan off. They've taken all this risk and all of a sudden you're going to pay it off. So they might charge you a hefty 3% year 1, then it scales down 2% year 2, 1% year 3, then maybe 1% year 4, then maybe 0 year 5. Just find out what those prepayment penalties are for each bank.
Don't take this lightly. Some people will see prepayment penalty and be like, oh, whatever, I'm going to stick with this loan for, the life of it. You don't know what's going to be, 2-3 years from now. You may be getting into a deal like we did on our first one where the terms weren't good. And, if we didn't know any better. So then if we would have had a crummy prepayment penalty, we would have been stuck paying the bank at year 2 or 3. So it's very important to really get low or no prepayment penalties. And this is usually an easy one to negotiate.
And this is to Jake's point. 3 years ago, Jake and I wouldn't have thought we were looking for 156, 200, 300 unit deals. We are now. All of a sudden, we've got this 25 unit deal. We don't really want to deal with it. It might be a thorn on our side. We might want to sell it. But if we didn't even think of what's going to happen with the exit strategy going forward, we're stuck with those prepayment penalties. So just keep an eye out and just take that into consideration.
Next one for all the folks out there saying, where the hell do I find the money? We'll start by putting in less money, right? So that's loan to value.
Yep.
We typically, I think the most we've ever put down is 20% or 15%. I don't know if we've ever put down 20%. I think the most we actually put down on a deal is 15%. So that'd be an 85% loan to value. So if you don't ask, you're never going to find out. So the banks that are hungry, the banks that are competing for the business, trying to grow, usually will do 15% down or an 85 LTV.
The reason why that happened is on our first deal, even though we got crappy terms, we got owner financing.
For
So we only
10%.
had, we only had to come up with 10% of the money down, which is it was still 20% loan to value, but 10% was our money and 10% was the seller's note. So that's really important. Next one is non-recourse. Is the bank going to give you financing, whether it's recourse, which is the majority of community lending, or is it going to be non-recourse, which is a lot of agency debt, CMBS and Fannie and Freddie? Non-recourse basically says the property's here. I can only go after the property. I cannot touch your personal assets. Now, they have something called bad boy carve-outs that if you do something negligent or fraudulent, they might be able to come after you. But for the most part, non-recourse means the only recourse they have against you is the property. When you have a recourse deal, they're coming after you personally. So just be aware of that.
The G Daddy carve out, the bad boy, the biker boy, right?
Yeah, you're killing me, bro.
Hey, well, the next one dovetails with it perfectly because the guarantee. So if you're non-recourse, you don't have a personal guarantee. Personal guarantee. This is one where you got to watch out for in your first deal. They're going to ask everybody involved to guarantee 100% of the property, and you should say, "Look, we just want pro rata guarantors. We'll guarantee how much equity we're going to have in the deal, and that's it." Sometimes they may say, "Well, will you go up to 120 or 130%?" You have a little wiggle room there, but typically you want to keep these to the equity that you're going to have in the deal. So if you have 30% equity, I'm going to be a 30% guarantor. It's called pro rata if you need the terminology.
And guys, that dovetails into the next one. He's talking about guarantees. The next one is origination fees, right? It's a tough one between guarantees and origination fees. Origination fees are one of those things you really have to negotiate hard on. We don't want to pay. But the great thing about real estate is everybody eats at the table. And this origination fee is basically, it's different than loan points. Origination fee is what it costs to originate the loan. So they're going to charge you, whether it's usually 1 point they're going to try to get. We've negotiated it down to as far as low as 0.25%. So, negotiate that fee hard, see what each one of them is charging you, and go back to Bank A and say, hey, Bank A, Bank C, I'm only getting charged a quarter. Can you do at least a half? So try to pit one against the other. You're going to have to pay an origination fee. This is where they they get paid on. So just
this is the nickel and diamond.
Yeah, be able to. And I want Jake to go through all those other fees also because it's important to get an idea of. They more or less are all in the ballpark, but let's list out these fees so you know.
Yeah, we can
else
list them
to
out so
expect.
you guys know they're there. But some of them appraisal fees. The bank's probably going to get 3 different appraisers. They'll probably shop the middle to the lowest one. Attorney fees, you're going to be what they're going to be depending on who you hire. Bank's going to have some attorney fees in there too. Doc fees, survey. You're going to be able to pick a surveyor and get the survey that you want, and then there's going to be different types of surveys out there. You don't want something that's going to show the boundaries, probably show the parking lots, show the lines. Loan fees, seasoning. You can assumable loans could be an option out there, and then there's going to be fees to assume it. But the line of credit is kind of interesting. Now, I look at this a little differently because a line of credit for us on our third deal was we actually got a line of credit from another bank and used it for our down payment. I don't know if this is used much out there, but it worked for us and it helped supplement some of the capital that we needed to get in the deal.
What's cool about a line of credit too, some banks, if you can ask them, if your mortgage is 300, maybe ask them, hey, can you make it 350 the mortgage, that extra 50 grand, hold it in escrow because it's almost like a line of credit. I need that money to fix up the apartments. And some banks will be willing to do that because they know that you're going to be putting money into their asset. You're going to be stabilizing their asset. So ask that. And the line of credit, once you've done the deal, go back to the bank and say, hey, Mr. Banker, I have the asset here. I have 20% down. I need a line of credit for the next 18 months to reposition this property. And when I refinance it out, I'll pay the line of credit off and I'll pay the mortgage off. Line of credit, you should be able to get 2 years of interest only. So, you need 100 grand and you got to pay 5% interest. So you're paying 5 grand a year to be able to use up to 100 grand in equity. So that's really powerful. Now, 2 questions that I want you to ask the bank. Do you work with seller financing? Some banks say yes, some banks say no. If they do, that's a big check plus. And the second one, just for your benefit, ask the bank, how do you price the interest rate? Do you go off LIBOR, like we mentioned before? Do you go off the 10-year Treasury? So you can get an idea of if they're pricing the interest rate the same, why is one guy a little bit higher than the other guy? You can go back and say, hey, listen, I got this from one bank who's pricing it this way. Why is yours higher? The more educated you are, the more information and knowledge you have, the more credible you're going to seem. That's why we always talk about credibility and talk about getting a credibility book together, bringing it to the banker, and bringing all these questions to him because they're going to be overwhelmed. They'll be like, wow, this guy is supremely prepared.
But Gino, all this stuff that you covered today, where could I get a copy of this?
Good question, Jake. email me, hit me up, Gino@jakeandgino.com. I will send you this document over. I think it's going to make you really do really well with your financing. The only thing I ask in return is go on our podcast. We have the #1 multifamily podcast on iTunes. We're #7 in real estate. We're really climbing up there. We're trying to spread our message out there. If you could just go on that podcast, leave us a review and subscribe to the podcast, that would mean the world to me and Jake, because we love spreading our message. We love bringing the energy to the podcast. So if you do that, it'd be wonderful. Email me at Gino@jakeandgino.com, and I'll send all this document to you.
Sounds good, Gino. See you next time.
Bye, Jake.
Audio